You're listening to Agile Ideas, the podcast, hosted by Fatima Abuchi. For anyone listening out there not having a good day, please know there is help out there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Agile Ideas. I'm Fatima, CEO at AMO, Mental Health Ambassador, and your host. Before we get into today's episode, I wanted to share with you all, if you are not already aware, that I have set up my own Substack newsletter, and it talks about all things execution and execution gaps. Originally set it up as a bit of a playbook for PMO, but then evolved it and now cover topics across change, transformation, and really insights from seeing and doing things in different environments over the last 20 years. The execution gap Substack newsletter is a little bit more of a deep dive and goes into practical how-tos in terms of addressing particular themes and challenges that I've observed or that viewers and followers have shared and asked. So to find the Substack newsletter, go to www.substack, that's substack.com/the execution gap. Over the past 30 years, Renee has led enterprise-wide strategic change and transformation, delivering value to Fortune 500 companies such as Bank of America, Kellogg, and McDonald's. Renee specializes in building world-class EPMOs, creating optimal business management routines to drive outcomes, accelerating change adoption through a human-centric approach, and cultivating high-performing teams through effective coaching, learning, and development. So please join me in welcoming Renee to the show. Renee, thank you so much for joining us today.
I am so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
It's been interesting. I was just saying as I was recording your bio that we coincidentally came across each other through an article I had written, and then I reached out and said, check out this article, and then we connected and now we're here. So I'm really excited. And share a lot of similar views with some of the things that you talk about. So I'm excited to get into all of that. But I wanted to kick us off with you recently made the leap from being in corporate America to entrepreneurship. How's it going so far? And has there been any interesting learnings in the last? I think has it been a month?
Just about. Yeah. Thank you for starting with that question, because obviously it's quite top of mind. Yes, just about, mid-May, I made the decision to officially open my own business consulting firm. I mean, look, I've spent 30 years in corporate America in some shape or form, large companies, small companies, mostly large companies. And then I, gained a lot from it, but I'd reached a point, you reach a point when, you want to work on your terms. I want to bring everything I have learned over those 30 years. And I found that corporate jobs were limiting. And, there's also some of the cultural dynamics of working in an organization that get tiresome. And I just made the decision that now is the time to go solo. And it's been great. The best part about it is meeting people like you, right? I mean, you don't have the time when you're a slave to the clock and you're a slave to your, Outlook calendar, and you're trying to commute back and forth. You just don't have the time to find, high quality relationships and invest in them. And so I am so appreciative of being able to do that right now. And I trust and have faith that that will lead to, one conversation leads to another. We're still in early days. Obviously, the market is a little soft in the summertime for here in the United States. A lot of vacations, but we're making progress. And again, I'm having a great time getting to know people and learning about their problems and business opportunities that I might be able to help them with. So we're off to as good a start as you can when you're starting a new business.
Well, welcome to the entrepreneurship journey. I'm sure it's going to be a roller coaster of emotions. I can definitely tell you that. And I think also, like you said, the experiences that you've garnered from your career are going to be immensely helpful in this small business. I like to think that having that big corporate background helps you understand problems on a larger scale, and then you just need to bite-size them down into a small business. So I think that's definitely going to be part of the journey, but I'm keen to see how that journey progresses as you go. Always here as an open ear. So tell me, you've obviously, when I sort of started talking about your background, you've worked at some really big companies. You spent almost 10 years at Bank of America. You've worked at Kellogg's, and most recently at McDonald. Is there a particular experience in your journey? I like to think of, our corporate career having some, I guess, career-defining moments. Was there any career-defining moments for you that really stand out, that is a lesson that you can tell us about that really helped shape your career?
Yeah, I think so. And to your point, given that I've worked at a lot of different places, there's a lot of stories to draw on. But when I reflect on kind of moments of inflection, there's two that come to mind. First, the first 10 years of my career, actually, before some of those companies that you mentioned, I was in business-to-business sales, started as an entry-level sales rep and worked my way up. And I found that I could be probably the second best sales rep all the time because I didn't really have that hunter instinct. I was a problem solver. So the first defining moment was when I actually read the book, Now Discover Your Strength, when I realized that I could keep doing what I was doing and being kind of, a second sales rep who happened to love to solve problems for customers, or I can just go get a job that leverages the skills of solving problems. And that was a big, big turning point in my career. The second one that really shaped kind of my passion for change management, that human centricity for execution, came later at my time at the bank. I was running banking centers at the time, or branches that you might refer to them, 40 of them. I had an extended team of about 400 people. And in that experience, that kind of frontline leadership experience, I learned the hard lessons about humanity, about change, and how humans respond to change. I ended up leading this team after a acquisition. We had acquired our rival, our local rival. And the majority of my staff came from that rival bank. And we had reached a point where we had to start implementing some standards, some standard ways of doing business, products, services, tools, and process. And so here you've got the majority of my team who came from someplace else, feeling all the things you feel when you've been acquired. And I had to convince them to change everything they know, change all the ways, and in some cases convince people to be more sales-oriented than service-oriented, and they never saw themselves that way. So it was a real mindset shift. And so it really taught me hard lessons about, you can draw up great plans, you can have a great product or process, but you got to win the hearts and minds. You got to meet people where they're at and pull them into the journey as opposed to push change onto them. I could go on and on about some of the techniques we use, but we might hear more about that in follow-up questions here. But that was a real a watershed moment, and it was experiences that I draw upon frequently when I start to work on a really large strategic change.
It's so interesting because you're right. When there's sort of your really large transformations like an acquisition, I feel like a lot of the time it draws people to have fear that they're going to lose their jobs or that a restructure is coming. And look, a lot of time there is a restructure. And I just feel like one of the things I see a lot, and I'm wondering whether you see this too, is change management in general sits in one of two camps. It's either an afterthought and completely neglected, and therefore there's no budget or resources assigned to it, or it's done, but usually under the guise of, that's the project manager's job or the program manager's job. What do you typically see, and how do you influence executives to give change management the time and energy that it actually needs to deal with situations like that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I too see a lot of variability. I see it as sometimes change management, when it's provided, they over-index on the upfront part. It's all about training and comms, and that's it. And they give no attention to post go live, no coaching and support. And I firmly believe that there is no amount of training you can put people through before the change is real, before your hands on the keyboard, that you'll never learn enough. You won't retain enough. You need to support them post go live. You're absolutely right. Now, in terms of convincing them of the investment, some of the learnings I've had came from mistakes, came from, like I said, this over indexing. We're going to do all this massive amounts of training, 6 weeks of training. We go live, and then everyone's scratching their head wondering, wait a minute, they're not doing it. They don't get it. They don't understand it. Oh, I guess we need to retrain them on everything, right? Everybody. And so one of the approaches I've taken that seems to have worked a few times is like, okay, let's play this out. How much energy do you want to spend doing it all again, right? After we go live, why don't we do this proactively? Why don't we do the minimum to get them excited and kind of conceptually ready for the change? And then let's spend the time, money, and energy coaching and supporting them after the change while they're doing it. Because then it's real. It's not conceptual. It's not hypothetical. They're really doing it. And that's when the real questions and concerns and fears starts to come out. And some of the techniques that I find that work way better than, over engineering on training, formal training, even online training, is shoulder-to-shoulder coaching. That doesn't cost you that much to go grab call it an early adopter, somebody who's a peer that's trusted, that you can have sit down virtually or otherwise, shoulder to shoulder, and say, talk to me. What is it about the process or the tool that you're getting stuck? Where are you getting stuck? And I can help you. That actually doesn't cost you that much. It's just takes some planning and forethought and some acknowledgement that you're probably not going to get them completely ready ahead of go live. You're going to need to be there to catch them, support them after you go live. So I'm very passionate about the kind of indexing or placing more emphasis on post go live because I think it works better and it's meeting people where they're at.
It's so interesting you say that because I see a lot of transformation programs. I can think of a recent one that was a quite large $50 million program, and change management and the change management team, they were allocated to this program, and they spent a lot of time planning the change and the training and the comms, and then they execute right at go live point. But nobody actually spent any time getting up. So you see all these people that are seeing things happening in this big program team of 100 people, but not really know what's coming. And then at the end, you expect them to get it in a 2 weeks, window. Well, it's just crazy to me. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we need to, there is scientific proof and studies that talk about the limits of training. The amount of information one retains diminishes dramatically with every hour, day, week between the training event and the actual application of the learning. It's kind of fact. So I think that's another strategy that I've used. I've kind of brought out some of those facts and go, look, I'm not making this up. Think about yourself. When you've taken a training, how quickly did it kind of leak right back out, right? And you needed to have some form of support or refresher once you actually started trying to apply the training or the new process, et cetera. So yeah, I'm not sure why folks struggle with the concept so much.
They like to I call the change management stuff fluffy. They like to think about the change management stuff as the fluffy stuff, your generic comms, your little loot bags and all those sorts of things. What are some, thinking about change adoption techniques and things you've seen, what are some of the metrics that you would typically use to measure a change adoption?
Yeah, so there's a wide range of those. So metric wise, look, there's some of the standard ones are ahead of time. You are trying to get a handle on their mindset. So I do want to take some surveys. I do want people to kind of rate their feelings and readiness about the change that's coming. I think that's pretty strong practice that I've seen work really well. But I also really like, and this isn't necessarily a metric, but I really like focus groups, like getting small groups together to hear about real concerns. I mean, I've done that a few times, and actually what came out of some of those focus groups were legitimate, either process flaws or missed opportunities, because employee base can be quite vast, and there could be a lot of variability in the current state. And so it's really hard to go find out every nit and nat and nuance that the organization may have. And those come out in talking to real people. So I do like to do that. And that does kind of supplement the quantitative data around sentiment surveys. Clearly, if at all possible, I'd love finding ways to measure the actual usage of the process or the tool. Sometimes that's quite easy. If it's a system, sometimes it's as simple as, logging in, right? How many times did they log in? And so it can vary. But process adoption, some of the techniques I've used are like post go live certifications. So I would go and send an expert in to kind of observe, how somebody might be applying that process. Again, this works in sales and customer facing scenarios where you can actually observe call centers, things of that nature. You can actually observe, and you can say, hey, are they adopting the best practices as defined? Where are they deviating? Where are they not? And you can quantify that too, especially when you're talking about a process change, because you're talking about behaviors and mindsets. So those are some of my favorite ways of doing it. And then my other favorite way is to kind of use a little competition. I believe that humans, as a rule, don't like to be embarrassed. And so taking advantage of that notion, what I'll do is post go live, we'll do some contests and you publish kind of some results so that people can see where they stack and rank against some of their peers. Are they coming up the learning curve, or are they not? And generally speaking, just having that displayed with no even real editorial behind it, it gets people going, hey, wait a minute, I'm in the bottom quartile. I don't want to be in the bottom quartile. What do I need to do? And so sometimes simply just exposing how people are doing it's not in a mean-spirited way. It's not in a shaming way, but it's just to kind of stoke that kind of competitive human nature to say, I want to succeed. I don't want to be at the, ranked at the bottom. And so let me get more engaged and let me figure out how I can, adopt and succeed. So those are some of the metrics and ways I try to measure adoption.
I think they're really great examples. And I think, like you said, depending on the culture and the environment, you'll modify. I think some people are so burnt by change happening at them, not with them, that it makes it really difficult. So I think any way of measuring improvements, that competition sort of style is really good, because we often assume people don't have capacity to get involved, but they actually really want to. And I feel like they're less fearful of the change if you include them.
Absolutely. I'll give you one more example, actually. Another technique I've used is taking advantage of FOMO, the fear of being left out. Another very common human trait, right? I implemented a new checklist for a call center, and there were 5 teams, and I gave this new script. Sorry, it was a script to help upsell better. And I gave it to one team. They started using it, and their cross-sell rates started improving really quickly. The other team started asking questions. Hey, all of a sudden your cross-sell rates are going through. What are you doing? Oh, well, I am using this new script, this new technique. It's working really well. So what has that done? I didn't get the benefits right away by exposing it to everybody. I took a slower roll to get it started, but now I have pull. Now I have people saying, when can I get it? When am I getting it? Because that looks pretty good. I want that. That is the easiest way to do change, to be honest, is when they're and I found that to work even better.
It goes back to what you said earlier. I mean, we call them super users as an example, but finding some of those, change champions, super users, those that have influence and pull in an organization, and leveraging them, because if they can get excited about the change and really sort of jump on board that journey, others will follow, because their trusted employee colleagues are actually on board that change. So sounds so simple, but people continuously make the mistake of not factoring these things in. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit, because still referencing change, but one of the challenges I think is, where does change management fit in an organization? Some people will say that if you're running an EPMO, which you've done many times, that change management is outside of the EPMO. Sometimes it says it's within the PMO. Where do you think change management as a capability within an organization actually fits? Where have you seen it work well and not so well?
Oh, I love this question. I'm very passionate about this question. So first, my current state is, you're absolutely right. It is everywhere, from HR to PMO to non-existent, right? It's all over the map. Personally, I see, I'll take you back to when I first learned anything about project management. It was 1,000 years ago, and it was it was as I was getting my Six Sigma black belt. That's when I first learned all about project management and change management. Wasn't through my time in technology, as it turns out. And in my mind, the way it was taught to me, it was embedded. I, as a Six Sigma black belt, did not have a specialist called a change manager to rely on. My job as the leading a Six Sigma project was to ensure that we knew the problem. We brainstormed solutions, tested those solutions, deployed them in a way that they stuck, and we got the benefits. Well, to do that, you have to know change management, because Six Sigma is all about process improvement. Well, who follows processes? People, humans. And until humans are all replaced with robots, which hasn't happened yet, right? We need to be aware and understand how humans behave. And so I learned all about behavioral science and human behavior and how they react to change as a part of running those programs. And so I'll be honest, I'm biased in that I like to see it integrated, because I'm tired that the energy wasted in actually trying to parse out the exact deliverables that are change versus program versus project. I kind of struggle with that. To me, it feels like wasted energy. I in fact, when I left McDonald's, one of the last missions I gave to my PMO lead was to upskill as many senior program managers on the full suite of change management, so that we weren't dependent on a consultant all the time. Not that I don't love consultants. I am one now, right? Yes. But sometimes you don't need all that overhead and infrastructure. You should just be you need to appreciate what it takes to make a project successful. And one of the things is adopting the change, whatever it may be. I also didn't want to be reliant on necessarily a dedicated team. We had a dedicated team as well, but they were limited in resources. So my final answer would be, personally, I'd love to see it integrated. I'd like to see if there is a place for a dedicated SWAT team of really, really highly skilled change managers for maybe the biggest transformations. Maybe they're more of a coach and less of a doer. And then the program managers are skilled at really doing the planning and driving it out, with the benefit of the best practices and the expertise from, say, a change COE. I really like that model. I get that a program manager can't be expected to be an expert in all disciplines. They need to phone a friend. They need support. But I don't like the idea of like two discrete individuals with different mindsets fighting over turf when inside of a project, or trying to parse out, my deliverable, your deliverable. I care about change, you don't. To me, that's wasted energy. And I like to see that merged with a support structure that makes sure they're armed and dangerous and ready to really manage the change effectively. So you may not have expected that answer, but no, it's the best one I have.
That example there just rings true to another program I was working on, where there was so much time spent debating what's change and what's project delivery, and they had consultants come in, very big name consultants, and they had to cycle through multiple change managers. And where we landed was we actually got clarity that change management, the the change management team, we're going to be managing the change and comms activity external to the program. So your end users, your operational teams, your vendors, etc. And then the PMO that sat in the middle said that they were going to be supporting the change into project delivery, working with the project managers, the program managers, the BAs, etc. So effectively, we worked in tandem as opposed to fighting over that turf. So it's a very real problem, and I do agree with you. I don't think it's always black and white.
Yeah, agreed.
So one thing that's really interesting, you talk a lot about change, and one of the things that you did during COVID is you sold your house and you gave everything away and you became a digital nomad. So if there's anyone who understands change, it's definitely you. Tell me about that.
Yeah. It's crazy, but look, I can get a little restless. My husband has a little wanderlust too, but like since I was a kid, I love change. I used to rearrange the furniture in my room like every month or so because I would just want something new. I haven't lived in the same house or quite frankly, as you can tell, even worked for the same organization all that long. I am not the person who's going to be obviously it's too late for that, but the 30-year lifer. I like change. I like change. And so this opportunity presented itself. Working from home was available to me. And as long as I had my background on, they didn't know where I was. In fact, we were really hoping in the early days that we could go to Europe even and work, I'll work, US time, but be in France. But the borders closed and that wasn't possible. So we instead took off to see a couple of different cities in the U.S. that we were interested in and loved the flexibility. I will say, from a professional perspective, I'm very conflicted on this topic. I love the work from home thing, but I also was running a massive business integration. We had acquired a small company 3 years prior to that and finally got around to integrating them. And then COVID hit. And there was big cultural differences. Think mom and pop entrepreneurial company bought by a behemoth, right? Mega corporation. So the culture clash was real, and not being able to look at each other in the eye, go out for a beer, break bread to kind of work through challenges took a toll. It did have an impact on the project. We got it done, but it was more painful than it needed to be. And I know COVID was a part of it, that inability, to get to know each other. Look, humans are social creatures. People need people, right? And, so I'm very conflicted on it. I'd like to return to home, but to return to office, but I really do, also like the flexibility and the reduction in commute time. I get to use that time for things like this, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And honestly, just based on the way that you described your style, this entrepreneurship journey that you're now on as your own consulting company is actually perfect for it because it gives you that flexibility to do that. But I agree. I think just on the return to the office mandate, the only thing I can say is if I think back 22 years ago when I started my career, I can't imagine getting to where I am today if I was early on in my career working from home. I think as an early, regardless of the age, but as someone starting early in their career, I think the benefit that you get from being in the office, maybe when you're more mature in your career and you've spent a long time building relationships, it might not be as impactful. But I do think that there's a big benefit of having the flexibility of being in the office more often than not, but also flexibility to also work from home without the guilt. So I think, but let's see how that plays out.
Great.
Lots of change.
Just to pile on there, the benefits for that early career person of being around senior career people who've been there, though, that's where some of the learning and the wisdom comes from. And so, we got to show up for our younger, early career teammates. And so, yeah, like I said, I'm conflicted. I love the benefits, but I also very much appreciate the power of, people being with people.
Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, you get forgotten. I really do think I'm very visual. If I don't see something, I forget about it. And often you forget about employees that aren't in the office,
You're
as
totally
sad as
right.
that is. So, one of the other things you talk about, which I love, and not many people talk about this, is the fact that project management should be for everyone.
Mm.
I'm super passionate about this because I feel like, particularly with the work that we've been doing over the years, is strategy is one thing, which we'll talk about in this moment, and then you've got delivery, and then you've got operational teams. And operational teams who are those that have to work with projects for most of their lifetimes don't seem to be given any training, any experience, any thought, but yet then people expect them to get up to speed on how projects are going to be delivered. So tell me why you're so passionate about that. And do you think that project management should be taught across the company, even for people that aren't in project management roles?
Great question. I'm so glad we get to this one, and I want to give this a good bit of air because I'm equally passionate about it. So, this epiphany happened when I was actually at Kellogg. I was asked to intervene on a business project that wasn't going well. I was working with operations people, marketing people, supply chain people, non-project management professionals, a little bit of IT, but not really, mostly business people. And these guys are smart, talented, some of the best in their fields, but had absolutely self-proclaimed no idea how to organize around a problem and get to the other side. It just, they couldn't do it. They couldn't get out of their own way. They couldn't get the traction. So as I said, I intervened, I got involved, we started to get organized, we solved some of the challenges that were getting in their way. And after a while, someone on the team coined the phrase, #need more Renees. They were so pleased with, how I helped them kind of get off dead center. But obviously, appreciate the compliment, but obviously the answer wasn't to go hire more Renees, right? That isn't, that isn't an option, financially, not an option, complimentary as that would be. So I actually got inspired to solve the problem another way, or to address this need another way. I created this high impact, concentrated, what is the minimum you must know as a business person to lead a project. And I started training different operational team members, marketing, supply chain team members on this. And then, true to my philosophy about change, I offered office hours every week that they could call into to get real time, on the spot coaching and feedback. They're putting a charter together that they have to go send to their boss to get some funding to start a project to solve a problem. They would show up with a copy of that charter, and I would critique it, and I would tell them how to make it better. I would point out where they have gaps. And we did that week in and week out, and people started showing up week in and week out to get that support and reinforcement. Because again, just like we talked about, I could have trained that all day long, but if they walked away, never used it again, it's gone. It's as if I never did it. And so we would try to catch them when they had active project work going on. And then again, we would back them up with that weekly access to an expert. I called it the phone a friend hour, right? Call in and get the help you need right now. And so that was our way of expanding our reach as a PMO without expanding a single head count. And that worked really well. We got incredible feedback on the process. We had every intention, and I think they're still doing it to this day. To your question about who and how should we teach project management, I am still shocked that people getting their MBAs in business school still walk out not knowing this. I have to say, I'm still shocked. Get your money back, guys, because you should be walking out knowing how to do this. I had this idea the other day. Think about HR. HR helps people managers manage people better. They have best practices, they have tools, they coach them and they counsel them, but they never actually manage the people for them, right? They help the people who do it. I think the PMO could take a similar role. Own the idea, as I did, of passing on the basic knowledge of how to run projects to everybody in the organization who wants it. And then, like I said, be there to support them but you don't do it for them, you support them. Now, there's always big strategic initiatives that a PMO, kind of like the change management conversation, you want your best and brightest and most experienced person. You're not going to go and ask somebody to play the role of a senior program manager who hasn't been there and done that. And there's a role for that, and we need to keep doing that. But not everything needs. It's kind of like not everything needs the sledgehammer, right? Not everything needs that level of expertise. And so how do we skill up the rest of the organization so when needed, they know how to get from point A to point B? Because after all, what is a project? I mean, a project is, to me, it's simply the path from current state to a better state. I don't know a single business leader who takes on a role, joins an organization for the first time and says, oh, status quo is just fine, no change is needed. That doesn't happen. They come in and they've got problems. They've got opportunities to seize and problems to fix. Projects are the path to do that. So you got to figure it out. And I think the PMO could be the one to help do that.
Absolutely. I think the PMO can be a catalyst for change, for delivery, for all of these things, and demonstrating by leading by example. It's so interesting because the executives themselves, you're right. I have this discussion recently with a senior board member that's been on numerous boards across the world. And one of the things I said to him is, why don't they teach board members project management? They all come from operational backgrounds. There's companies out there. One of the companies I worked for spent $1 billion per annum on project management. $1 billion per annum just on projects. So to change their business, but then they didn't spend anywhere near the amount of money on actually training the people that had to receive the change in the operational areas, or even spend the time to help them to ask the project managers the right questions to keep them accountable. They just got the change delivered, thrown over the fence, and then operational teams had to live with that and try to realize the benefits and so forth. So I'm super, super passionate about this, and it's not something often people talk about. So I think it's a great example. It's interesting. So talking about project management in general, one of the things I wanted to touch on is, I know you talk a lot about how well-formulated strategies fail more often than not because of the idea, but more due to missing capabilities. People misconstrue what capabilities mean. They think it means capabilities of an individual, where I think capabilities is your people, your process, your tools more broad. We talk a lot about that, but what do you think the organizations most commonly are falling short when it comes to execution?
Most commonly, boy, there's quite a few there that I can think of. But I would say if I had to pick the one that they fall short on, I would say kind of the more operational excellence. And the reason I say this, and this might not be the answer that you were thinking, but often I think organizations think of operational excellence or good business routines and management routines as the domain of manufacturing. And they don't think of, if you're a service provider, they don't think that applies to you. And I would submit that if that's the case, then you are likely talking about the wrong things with the wrong people at a time that's too late to do anything about it, not using facts and data, but gut and intuition. And you're probably making bad decisions or poor decisions that are leading you maybe in a different direction. And you're probably slightly behind the curve because you're inefficient in how you are operating. And to me, that is something that I think this is kind of like the project management topic. It's just taken for granted that everybody gets into a C-suite role and just knows how to run their function, knows how to run it all. And I find over and over again, people do not. They may be subject matter experts. They may be the best person who's ever done logistics. They may be the best brand manager ever, but they don't necessarily know how to harness the power of their team, measure what matters, talk about what's important, make better decisions, and continuously improve how they do what they do. Those are things that are secondary. It's really more focused on the subject matter, the subject matter, the domain, the marketing, the logistics, the transportation. and kind of the ecosystem that you need to put in place to effectively run a team, a function, a department is taken for granted. And so when I look at kind of the core 4 capabilities that I look at, I see that one as like for C-suite folks, that one gets the least attention. And I think it should get the most attention, to be honest, right?
So we talked about change, we've talked about operational, and a little bit about PMO. From a strategic planning perspective, what do you think? What do you think organizations are getting wrong? I feel that there's so much time spent on strategy because it appears to be more fun, and then those plans seldom get delivered, and it's just carry over from quarter to quarter to quarter. What do you think we're getting wrong when it comes to strategy formulation, strategy planning, and what's the advice you can give to leaders that maybe are new to this space?
Great question. So I would say I think of it, there's strategy development and then there's strategic planning in my mind. When I think about strategy development, this is the fun part. This is the pie in the sky, the blue sky thinking. Everybody loves that. There's a million consulting that you can pay millions of dollars to help you do that and bring you outside in thinking. Check, got it. Not going to argue that that's not valuable. There is definitely value. But the next step is the translation of all that fun, sexy, futuristic stuff into something you can do something about and you can action on. And that's the gap that I see. I see a gap between the blue sky pie, really exciting, cool stuff, and the day-to-day, what do we have to do today to make our quarterly number? That's like a short-term goal. There's nothing in between, or worse, there's nothing that bridges it all the way and makes what you're doing today make any sense, right? What you're doing today, tomorrow, next month, next quarter should all be in service of your strategy. And what often I see is siloed strategic planning, function by function. Okay, well, I got my goal. Thank you very much. And here's my world. Here's my portion of it. And these are my strategic priorities. These are my goals for the year. And I'm going to cascade to them at my team. Hot dog, right? But what doesn't happen is the pull all the way from the big strategy, the big initiatives, the big priorities, and how you as a collective team, cross-functional team, all have to contribute to the achievement of the big goals. It looks something like, I'm sure you're familiar with OKRs. It's kind of, that's an old methodology, objective and key results. I find that people can't even figure that out. I'll be honest. I'm not going to name names, but very recently I've had to facilitate some serious working sessions to get very senior leaders to understand the difference between an objective and a key result and how the linkage has to make sense. It has to tick and tie back to the big goals. Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? And I'm sorry if it's because you think it's what your function should do, but it's disconnected from the larger picture and the larger goals. I think that is an error. That is a missed opportunity. That's waste. And that needs to be reconciled back with the larger strategy that has been developed. That's not to say things don't change and evolve, right? Obviously, the days of, you talked about 20 years ago, your career started. I'm a little bit. I started more like 30 years ago. And I remember learning about doing a 10-year plan, and then it became 5-year. And look, now we're down to the quarter. And so I do understand speed is a component here. And so you can't spend, months and months and months, over analyzing. You do have to start to put things on paper and get after some things and course correct along the way. I believe that in some ways, strategic planning is a continuous process and not an event.
Yes.
You're getting continuous feedback as you implement new things, as you make changes, as you get new external feedback. You should be constantly reevaluating. Is the strategy on point still? Do we need to make an adjustment? Are the initiatives that are going to realize that strategy the right ones? And that should be a question that is asked quarter in, quarter out, nonstop, because things are changing so fast. And I can certainly appreciate that. It's
a really good point. The continuous feedback is something that's undervalued. I think one thing you said that I see a lot of is the silo thinking for strategy. And I get it. There's, one department and division is different to another. But the challenge is, and I don't know if you've seen this before as well, but I found that after they spend all this time developing their strategy and putting their plans together, that you end up finding, at least in one manufacturing organization as an example, one team was actually delivering a piece of work, a significant piece of work that actually was going to undo a piece of work in another division.
Yeah.
So there
all
was
the time. All the time.
Yeah. So it's just
all the time. Yes. And so that's where that portfolio view that the PM, this is where PMO can come into play and really help create that portfolio view. Let's look at bodies of work that are all thematically related. Are they really working in harmony? Are they some support of each other, or are they working at cross purposes? Kind of evaluating, zooming out and really taking an evaluative look. I think a PMO is uniquely positioned to do that because they're unbiased. They're not from any one of those functions. None of those initiatives are their babies, right? And they're beautiful and perfect, right? So they're looking at it more objectively. I think the PMO can play a great role in providing that analysis.
100%. If it's got the support, sponsorship, backing, respect. Because there are some PMOs that are not doing a good job, that are making it harder for everybody else. But one of the things, speaking of programs and complexity and process, I'm interested to get your thoughts on, let's say that there's someone listening running a complex program or supporting a complex program. They're low on resources. They don't have the capacity to bring in any additional resources, and they don't have the time to fix everything. What would you say would be the sort of 2 or 3 key focus areas if you were coming in to rescue a program that maybe was being challenged and you had limited resources?
Yeah. So I've been asked to rescue projects, many, many times. And over the years, I've actually developed I think it's a 14 questionnaire, a checklist, if you will, a project rescue checklist. And I use this to kind of help me figure out where to start. And some of the elements on that, and it ranges between what I'll call the hard skills and the soft skill stuff, so to speak, right? There are elements of project management that are tangible. You're like, do you have any idea the why this project exists, right? Is there coalition around the purpose of it, the objective? And so kind of that charter work, right? To be honest, if you do nothing, getting clear on the problem you're solving and the goal and the definition of done, I think of those as like those early charter questions you would ask. That's like 80% of it. I mean, most of the time I see programs that are off track, it's because you don't have alignment or agreement on that. And why that's important is because you end up with scope creep, too much work, because you're not clear, you don't have your eye on the prize. The prize is unclear. So some of those common sins that you see with projects going off the rails, like scope creep, are actually the root cause is upstream, back in the definition of done, back in the problem statement, back in the goal statement. So I start there. Give me the charter. Give me the goal statement. Give me the problem that you were trying to solve in the first place that justified the existence of this program. If that is not rock solid, super clear, unambiguous, and totally aligned by all the sponsors, time out, right? Start there. Risks and issue management. I would say you go there next. As people are doing their contributions to a project, right? Things come up, things happen, right? And so teasing them out in a proactive way, creating an environment where red is embraced, yellow is embraced, right? We get rid of that fear of reporting bad news early, right? That's actually good news. I would attack that next, right? So that you can problem solve more rapidly. And then the third thing I would tack is simply your governance cadence. Are you having conversations with the sponsors frequently enough? And are you talking about the right things? Are you being candid? Are you exposing the real deal, the real issues with the sponsors who can do something about it? So your rhythms, your governance and your rhythm, business, your management routines as it relates to the program, I think would be the third thing I would attack.
It makes sense because if any of those things are not being focused on, it could make sense for why the program or project might be failing or heading towards failure. I think just educating people on fundamental risks and issue management is sometimes something that needs to happen as a mandatory piece as well. But that's a conversation for another day.
I have done straight up risk management 101 training too, even just getting people to understand the difference between a risk and an issue.
Yes,
They don't get it.
Yes,
they don't
yes,
get it. I'm
yes.
like, a risk might happen, an issue did happen. Can we just keep it that simple?
Exactly. It's for the fundamentals. Another question I had for you is, if a leader is listening today, and obviously you've spent a lot of time coaching, mentoring, and building teams, if a leader is listening and feels like their team is stuck or they're feeling overwhelmed, how would you recommend that they support their team to, I guess, get them unstuck?
In a project context, or in a more team or functional context?
Yeah, more like in a team function. More as a leader, you want to do right by your team. Your team feels a bit overwhelmed, it feels a bit stuck, and I guess you just need to figure out, well, what exactly is the problem and help them. Maybe you're a new leader to an existing team, like in your acquisition example.
Yeah. So the first thing I do is I get real curious, right? As a leader, my job at that point, it's not about judgment. It's about getting curious. So I generally will go steal the best practices from traditional root cause analysis, RCA. All right. What are the symptoms that you're seeing? What are the problems that you're feeling? And then we have to start to dig underneath. Often, this is a human condition as well. Humans aren't great at naturally diagnosing the root cause. We see symptoms real well. That's easy, right? I'm feeling this, I'm seeing this. But it takes dialogue. It takes curiosity, and it takes patience to say, all right, let's dig deeper. Why did that happen? It's such an old school tool, but I love the 5 why technique. I love just continuing to probe and ask why just enough times for them to kind of go, oh, that's why this is happening. That's the problem. I'm a big fan of coaching, not telling. So I also like to lead the witness. I like to ask really potent questions. I actually want my team to self-discover what the opportunities are, to learn how did they get here. I don't actually want, in the context of leading a team, not necessarily as a consultant, but as a team leader, I actually want to enable my team to be successful. I'm not here to tell them what to do. That's management from a different decade, right? I'm not interested in being that kind of a leader, but I do want to grab them by the hand and get them through the process, facilitate that, ask potent questions, and help them self-discover, where might they be wasting their time? Let's go, tell me about your goals and your priorities. How are you spending your time? And then through that dialogue and that self-discovery, often than not, the employee self-discovers the real issue. They go, okay, I see what it is. I'm over-indexing on this, and it's because I've had a bad experience with that in the past, and that is unfair, and it's actually creating pressure on not spending enough time on the most important things. So, got it. I'm going to make a pivot. That to me that's what leadership is all about. It is enabling, not doing for them.
You've got to do that so that they can learn. And as they say, you've got 2 ears for a reason. So leaders probably need to listen more to be more effective overall. So we're almost at the end of our conversation today, which I've really enjoyed it. And I always say this, but genuinely speaking, I think we could talk for a lot longer. My last question for you today, Renee, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners? A call to action, a piece of advice, or a question to ponder today?
Oh my, that's a loaded one. So when I think about leading high performing teams, driving strategic change, I think about setting having a shared team purpose with individual accountability, right? I think about leaders who pick great talent and then get the heck out of the way, right? And again, be that coach or be that enabler. That's the kind of leaders. In fact, I just hosted a a leadership webinar today, specifically for female leaders. And we talked about some of the best practices of leadership. And much of them was about, it's not about you, it's about your team. And the days of you being successful on your own are over when we take on the responsibility of leading and building a high performing team. And so I just encourage people to really embrace that role of coach, embrace the role of, I call it the CMO, your chief marketing officer of your team, right? Meaning you are the best person to tell the story of your team, to talk about the impact you're having. Steal a page from consultants and use, mini case studies. What was the problem? How bad was it? What change did you implement? And now what are the results? That's a powerful story that you can tell and showcase to brag about, the accomplishments of your team. And only you can do that as the leader. And so these are some of the things that have been on my mind lately, in particular about leading high performing teams.
Amazing. Thank you, Renee, for all your insights. I continue to follow your journey on LinkedIn, which I will share in the show notes. I'll also just share and reference people to go to your website, rsgconsultinggroup.com, to learn more about the consulting work that you're doing, which is no doubt going to be very impactful based on your experience over the years. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to continuing our journey for following and sharing content and collaborating more, because I think you share a lot of really clear insights that I don't think people always put front and center, particularly around like operational excellence, and also just the catalyst that a PMO can be. So it's very refreshing, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. Likewise, the admiration is quite mutual. I love your posts, and I will continue to follow you and engage via LinkedIn as well. So thanks again for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Please share this with someone or rate it if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to follow us on social media, and to stay up to date with all things Agile ideas, go to our website, www.agilemanagementoffice.com. I hope you've been able to learn, feel, or be inspired today. Until next time, what's your Agile idea?